Normally, when talking about the history of anime, it's usually divided into the pre-Evangelion and post-Evangelion era. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call Evangelion the most important anime in history. Yes, more important than Dragon Ball, more important than Astro Boy even. And I'm not exaggerating, it literally changed what kind of stories are told, how they're told, for whom they're told, and how they're made. Before Evangelion, anime used to be focused on a family or child audience, and animation studios used to own the animations they made. But all of this changed in 1995 with the premiere of EVA. It was the first successful TV anime made for adult otaku, and at the time, it was a phenomenon to the point that mystical plots, fan service, graphic violence, and waifus became the norm.
But its success came at a cost that is slowly killing the anime industry.
There's a story that actually might serve to illustrate just how big the impact of Evangelion was in the 90s. In 1997, as part of the promotional campaign for the premiere of The End of Evangelion, a film that was initially meant to serve as the conclusion of the franchise, Gainax, the studio behind the series, released a limited edition of postcards featuring the main characters. One of these postcards showed Rei Ayanami, one of the most popular characters in the series, in an aquatic scene. This postcard was distributed as a special gift for those who visited an amusement park called Hakone Kawakian Yunesun, located in the Hakone region of Japan. The park was chosen due to its connection to the series. Hakone is the inspiration for Tokyo 3, the fictional city where much of Evangelion takes place. The park had very little staff, as it was the Japanese summer, which are famous for being extremely hot. So, who would travel hundreds of kilometers in extreme humid heat for a piece of paper? Well, when the series fans found out about this promotion, they started traveling in droves to the amusement park to get the postcard. I am talking about thousands and thousands of people, causing multiple damages to the park's property, which caused national and international news. And we have a lot of stories like that regarding Evangelion. So, as a result of this tremendous success, what Evangelion did, the anime industry followed. And a particularity of Evangelion was how Gainax, the animation studio, financed it. They were nobodies without a penny to their name, having done some projects, but either they failed, or if they were successful, it was for a very limited audience, so they didn't leave a lot of money. So to pay for the series, they had to use a business model called production committee. They weren't the first to use it. In fact, there were 3 anime that used it before them: Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind from Ghibli, Akira by Katsuhiro Otomo, and the irresponsible Captain Tylor. But since Ghibli is a studio that's basically in its own league and operates very differently from the entire industry, and Akira literally became the biggest failure in anime history, taking the whole industry down with it. And that the irresponsible Captain Tylor wasn't a failure or anything, but it wasn't a smash hit either. The model never really caught on, and it wasn't until Evangelion became a mega hit that it became popularized. But anyway, what is a production committee exactly, and how does it work? Well, previously, anime series used to operate under a sponsor system, where companies would put up their money to finance the anime in exchange for promotion, and the animation studio would keep the rights to the anime. The companies would get their promotion, and the studios would get their anime. It was a win-win. Now, this is the opposite of a production committee, where other companies, like the one that would sell the figures or DVDs of the series, would put up the money. Up to this point, it doesn't sound too bad. It sounds very similar to the sponsor system. And initially, it was. You as a studio would get your anime, maybe with lower profits, but it was easier to create an anime, especially if you were a small studio. However, the bad part comes when, over the years, this model was copied for other anime, with the difference being that the animation studio wouldn't have the rights to the series, but the companies that put up the money would, preventing the studios from receiving royalties and growing, essentially becoming just a factory who had to follow the orders of the production committee, even if they were really dumb. Believe there is a lot of stories of members of production committees asking for a lot of dumb things. But anyway, that's a story for another day. The important thing is that with the companies selling the DVDs, figures, and other merchandise like branded toilet paper, yes, that exists and is a big market, to these companies, the anime itself producing money wasn't the most important thing. Okay, it's not like they didn't care at all. After all, if the anime became successful, it would mean more profits. But what was most important was that the DVDs, figures, or merchandise they made sold well. So for these companies, who were the ones putting up the money and maintaining most of the power over the production, if the anime wasn't very successful in ratings, but managed to sell a lot of its DVDs and Blu-rays or figures, then it would be worth doing. So essentially, many anime became commercial, which is why so many aren't finished, or if you want to be more paranoid, are poorly adapted, or create original endings, to make people seek out the original material and buy it. And this is also why almost all anime air in the early morning, as those time slots are cheaper, and the producers really don't care about ratings that much. Now, with all that context out of the way, we need to see what the impact of all that was on the industry and what it changed. In my opinion, it had 3 main impacts. First, due to this economic crisis, we have an industry whose customers don't have much money to spend on non-essential things like travel, music, or anime and manga. So the industry most likely went into a panic, which was worsened by the crisis in the anime industry that Akira's failure caused, which took many years to overcome. Second, due to the aforementioned crisis, a group of people who didn't leave their homes and became obsessed with anime, manga, and video games started to emerge, and who would spend all the money they had on on these hobbies as a form of escapism. This was likely exacerbated by the 1995 terrorist attacks, which created a great fear in the population, especially in this group of hikikomori, who are documented to have a great fear of going out. This group, despite not having much money, would prove to be extremely profitable, as they would be willing to spend thousands of dollars to support their favorite series. To give you an idea, nowadays, without counting merchandising, an anime series of 12 episodes is considered successful only if it manages to cross around 2,500 DVD and Blu-ray copies sold. I know that sounds like very few copies, but the money generated by these small number of copies is not small when you consider that a single DVD, which usually contains 2 or 3 episodes, costs more than $90. Why do they cost so much? Well, that's because those prices were originally intended for video rental stores, not everyday people. But eventually, these otaku who wanted to have their own collection and show their support started buying these series. And when the video rental stores started collapsing in the 2000s due to the arrival of the internet, the industry became more dependent on these otaku. And if you're wondering, yes, there have been attempts since the 90s to sell anime DVDs at more accessible prices to attract a larger audience, but they haven't been too successful, as the group of people who buy them hasn't increased much. Again, it's just a relatively small group. This brings us to the third and most important impact. Evangelion popularized the production committee financing model for anime, which ended up creating an industry that, for the most part, didn't have to focus on the success of the anime series itself, but on the sales of the products it could create. Or in other words, the industry was desperately in need of money due to the financial crisis, the same one that created a group of people who were desperate to consume large amounts of anime and manga, which served as an escape. And this group, due to the 1995 attacks and the financial crisis, had little money but were willing to spend absurd amounts. And the production committee model allowed the industry to monetize this group semi-effectively. So the anime industry shifted to serve these otaku and hikikomori audiences, producing more series with elements like fan service, extreme action, or more niche narratives, as these were the things this group was demanding. In other words, the industry was no longer primarily focused on the success of the anime itself, but on the sales of the related merchandise, and the best way to do that was doing whatever the heck otakus wanted.